So hello guys, and welcome to another video. And the Nintendo Switch is 7 years old, which is kind of crazy and insane to think about, because the initial hype of the console didn't even feel like that long ago. Like, you just had to be there when it released. Like, it was just a great time to be a Nintendo fan, because it was kind of coming out of an era that really looked dire for Nintendo. Like, a lot of people thought that the Wii U was gonna be like Nintendo's like last console, or Nintendo was gonna like go bankrupt or become a third-party developer. Something like people were like going that far, but Nintendo had a great strategy with the Switch. I mean, they did have some issues, like the Switch was kind of rushed out a little bit. I feel like it was originally probably intended to release in holiday 2017, but they kind of had to release it before because of how much they were struggling during the Wii U era. But it was just a great time when it was revealed. It kind of felt like Nintendo was finally kind of like back in terms of like between like game releases, because 2017 was like way better than 2015 and 2016 combined, I'd say. Even though 2015, I would say that's a fairly decent year for Nintendo. 2017, like, had so many heavy hitters, like Breath of the Wild. Well, this is a port, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, but I mentioned that because it sold really well. And then also ARMS, Splatoon 2, Mario Plus Rabbids, as well as Super Mario Odyssey and Xenoblade 2. There were so many great games that released that year, and it was just a great year in general. But ever since then, like, Nintendo has been doing pretty well, but they've also had some issues as well. But recently, I feel like they've been kind of improving upon those issues, and I feel like we've come, like, quite a long way since 2017 in that sense. Like, I kind of wanted to discuss that as well as, like, the overall impact of the Switch and everything, but kind of starting off, like, since 2017, the Switch has sold nearly 140 million units, which makes it the third best-selling console behind the DS and PS2, which means that it had quite a huge cultural impact. Like, handheld gaming is still very popular because of the Switch. Like, and a lot of Nintendo's franchises are still very relevant, and, like, some of the most popular franchises still to this day, like, partially due to Nintendo kind of delivering with the Switch in the games and everything. And like the Switch, I feel like it has a similar cultural impact to like the DS and Wii, because back in the 2000s, I remember like almost everyone had a DS and Wii. Like, I remember like most of my friends and even family members had like Wii's, or a lot of my friends had like DS's. I remember like playing New Super Mario Bros. With a lot of people, but the Switch is kind of similar in that sense, maybe even to like a wider extent, because I see quite a lot of people with a Switch. Like, it's not uncommon to just go out in public and see like a kid playing a Nintendo Switch, or just kind of like meeting a friend that will have like a Switch. Like, it's just everywhere, and I feel like it's been that way for the past few years. It just has a huge impact in general, which kind of like sets it apart from like the competition and everything. Like, I mean, I know like consoles like the PS4 have been doing really well, but I feel like the Switch even has like a wider cultural extent. But yeah, so I kind of wanted to get into like how far we've come since 2017 as well. The Nintendo Switch has done quite a lot in terms of like improving things over the past couple years. And the first thing that comes to mind is the fact that Nintendo might be ditching the fix-it-later approach, or basically the thing where Nintendo released a game with a very small amount of content and added the content that should have been in the base game later to kind of artificially make the game popular for a longer amount of time. This is kind of like a pseudo live service approach, and I feel like Nintendo has been kind of going off of that live service model. I mean, even though it isn't really live service, it just kind of reeks of live service. And that really didn't work out for a lot of games. Like, a lot of games have dropped off dramatically in popularity, like, because of this approach. Like, Nintendo Switch Sports, even though it sold fairly well, barely anyone talked about it after it released. Same goes with Mario Strikers Battle League, all of the other Mario sports games, and this even goes for a lot of other games as well. I wouldn't say Animal Crossing suffered from this, even though some people were critical of it having a lack of content. Same goes for Mario Maker 2, but I feel like those games had enough content at launch in order to justify both their price and, like, kind of, like, being able to stay popular for a long time. So those games didn't really suffer from it. And another game that didn't really suffer from it either is Splatoon 3, which is why I say that Battle League is like the last time they really kind of had like this approach mishandled and kind of like poorly approached. So I feel like Nintendo's been moving on from it, which, if that's the case, I'm really happy about, because it really felt anti-consumer, and it really brought down the quality of a lot of their online games that they released. Like Mario Strikers Battle League, that had like the opportunity to become one of the best multiplayer Mario games, like if it had as much content, or if more content than Mario Strikers charged. Like, the core gameplay was there. The game itself, though, was just like a skeleton of a game. It was like a tech demo. There was like nothing to do. So I really hope Nintendo moves on from this, and it really seems like they kind of are at this point. But I wanted to get into another thing that is a little more speculative, but might end up being the case. And I did make a video about this, so I only wanted to touch on this a little bit, and that is the fact that Pokemon might finally be improving. So Pokemon has been kind of a notorious franchise during the Switch era. Like, Sword and Shield, Scarlet and Violet, especially Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, had a ton of issues, bugs, were unoptimized, lacked content and features. Like, Pokemon was really missing the mark, and it, like, in terms of, like, their games and the quality of their games, like, the only games that I don't really think suffered from this are Legends Arceus in the Let's Go games, and also the spin-offs, but I don't really think those count. But Pokemon has really been struggling during the Switch era, but I really hope that Pokemon Legends ZA is going to improve things, because that game isn't releasing until next year, and there's a possibility that there will finally be enough development time put into that game and everything, and finally kind of breaking the cycle of the franchise and everything. But I already discussed that in detail in the other video that I did, so I kind of wanted to move on to some other things. And another thing that I'm really happy about, and this has kind of been more of a gradual thing throughout the Switch era, is the fact that the Mario franchise is becoming more creative and more interesting. It is kind of doing the things that we've been wanting them to do for quite a while. Like, Mario Odyssey was, and also Mario plus Rabbids, was kind of the start of like a creative renaissance for Mario, but I feel like Mario Wonder pushed it even farther. Like, now, we're kind of like full on back in that kind of golden era of Mario again in terms of creativity. Like, I know, like, some of them are remakes, but they're remakes of some of the most unique, wacky, interesting, fun Mario games ever. Like Super Mario RPG, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, yes, that game is amazing. And especially Thousand Year Door. I am so glad that they are remaking that game, because that's my favorite game of all time. But yeah, and another thing is the fact that Nintendo's been bringing back so many dormant franchises. Like Endless Ocean, announced recently. That looks really good. I'm glad it's a new game, because I know we've been getting a lot of remakes, and the remakes are great, but I'm glad that Endless Ocean is going to be like a new game. And then another code I heard the remake of those games were good, as well as Famicom Detective Club. F-Zero even somewhat came back with F-Zero 99, and that is great. Even though it's not a full F-Zero game, it's still a very fun game in its own right. And it actually brings over, like, a lot of elements from, like, F-Zero X and GX, kind of bringing it into that classic SNES F-Zero formula, so I think that's pretty cool. And Advance Wars is also back with a remake. Unfortunately, the remake didn't sell well, but I hope that isn't going to be an indication to Nintendo that they shouldn't make any new games. I just hope they saw that, like, like, the circumstances behind that game is partially why it didn't sell well, but yeah, I feel like that's a discussion for another day. But Pokemon Snap is also back, 2D Metroid, and you can even argue that, like, classic Paper Mario and Mario Party are, like, with Mario Party Superstars, and to some extent Super Mario Party, with the fact that, like, older Mario formulas are finally returning to form. But yeah, like, I feel like Nintendo, during the Switch era, has either been bringing back these dormant franchises, or have been bringing back certain series to how they were before, like, the Wii U and 3DS era, because weirdly, they were, like, really experimental with some series during that era. I mean, not in a good way, either. I mean, sometimes Nintendo can be experimental in great ways, but with how they handled series like Chibi Robo, Paper Mario, Mario Party, different things like that, I feel like they weren't really handled in a great way, so I feel like now, during the Switch era, they're finally bringing back a lot of these series to their former glory. That's just kind of my take on it, but yeah. But unfortunately, there are still some persisting issues with the Switch. I mean, some of these I feel like are bigger issues than others. Some of these aren't that huge of issues. Like, one, with the underpowered hardware, that's not a huge issue. Especially considering that within the next year or two, we're gonna get a new console that might have, like, 4K and, like, might be capable of running some current-gen games. But the underpowered hardware of the Switch isn't too big of a deal right now, because Nintendo is mostly relying on their first-party games, and most of them, aside from Pokemon, are pretty well optimized. So I don't think that's too big of a deal, but I mean, in terms of, like, third-party games not being optimized well, yeah, I definitely get that criticism, and that is one of the reasons why I hope we get the Switch 2, like, sometime soon, like, hopefully, like, next year. But yeah, not too big of an issue, but I can understand the criticism. And another thing is the state of Nintendo Switch Online. This is one thing that I'm still kind of critical about, because the output is still pretty slow, especially for the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance libraries. We still don't have games like Super Mario Land, or Donkey Kong 94, or Donkey Kong Land, and a lot of others, or Pokemon, on the original Game Boy library. And then Game Boy Advance, we're still missing a lot of games as well, like Wario Land 4, and a lot of other things. So, it's definitely disappointing that, like, it seems like they're kind of, like, really slacking on that library. And we're still missing things like Diddy Kong Racing, Donkey Kong 64, Smash 64, and the Nintendo 64 library. And then they're also doing a lot of region-exclusive games that people have been wanting for quite a while in the West, like Mother 3. I mean, yeah, I know that's, like, the one game that Nintendo's never gonna bring over here, but, like, still, it still kind of sucks that we're paying $50 for a service that still has region exclusives. I just wish, like, we got some translations with that. Like, that's the least they can do. Like, since we're paying so much for the service. But yeah, but kind of getting back on a positive note, this past year, the 7th year, has been absolutely amazing for Nintendo. And I feel like it even tops 2017 in terms of, like, the game releases that we've got. And I'm kind of referring between, like, March 2023 up until now. Like, today, March 3rd, 2024. So, first we got Advance Wars 1+2, which I mentioned before. I feel like that's really underrated. And then after that, we got Tears of the Kingdom, which was definitely an amazing and worthy sequel to Breath of the Wild. I know some people are a bit iffy on it, like, I know some people are like just saying it's like a glorified DLC to Breath of the Wild, but I do not feel that way at all. Like, the depths in the Sky Islands and all the new mechanics like Ultra Hand and Fuse just add so much to the game. Like, it doesn't really, it doesn't really feel like a sequel. It feels like kind of like Breath of the Wild, but with like very different gameplay mechanics. And like, I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of like Galaxy 2 in terms of a sequel, but it also adds quite a lot as well, like with the depth and everything, but it is amazing regardless. And Pikmin 1 plus 2, which were ports of the GameCube Pikmin games, that was great. And then following that, Pikmin 4, which is absolutely amazing as well. Definitely up there along with Tears of the Kingdom as one of my favorite games of all time. Then F-Zero 99, which I mentioned before. Detective Pikachu Returns, which that game kind of came and went. I really didn't hear that much about that game. I heard it was kind of underwhelming, like especially with graphics and things. Apparently, it was originally a 3DS game, but that is not an excuse at all. Like, we're like 5 years past the point where the 3DS stopped receiving new games. Like, that is more than enough time to develop. Like, you could develop, like, a Detective Pikachu game. Like, you can develop an entirely new Detective Pikachu game twice in that amount of time. And it will still look way better than this new game. But, yeah, it's just kind of weird. But on a better note, Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Another one of my new favorite games now. Absolutely amazing, revolutionizes 2D Mario, and it's just so creative and fun overall. Then WarioWare Move It, highly underrated game. I actually like it just as much as WarioWare Get It Together. And then we got the Super Mario RPG Remake, which finally brought back the Mario RPGs, like, fully. Like, because for so long, I've been wanting, like, the Mario RPGs to actually get, like, a traditional turn-based game. I mean, Mario plus Rabbids is amazing, but I was really itching for something, like, more along the lines of either classic Paper Mario or Mario & Luigi, and the Mario RPG remake definitely scratched that itch for me. And we're getting the Thousand Year Door remake as well, so things are looking great for Mario RPG fans, and I am ecstatic as one of them. And then we also got another Code Recollection in January, which I've heard some pretty good things about. I haven't played it, but it's great that they brought that series back. And then Mario vs. Donkey Kong, which is another highly underrated game, like the remake of the GBA game, and it is just really fun overall. I really wish, like, critics kind of gave it more credit. I just feel like critics were a little too harsh on it, honestly, and I'll get into that in my review. Demeech also said, like, quite a lot about that in his review, and I definitely agree with him, but yeah. So, now that I've kind of discussed the games over the past year, I kind of wanted to discuss some things going forward for Nintendo, because it's pretty interesting right now. Like, honestly, it's kind of sad about the state of the video game industry right now. Like, so many companies are struggling, and a lot of companies are dealing with, like, major layoffs, like PlayStation especially. I think there were even some of, like, Microsoft and EA and things. It is not looking good for the game industry. Like, it's like taking so long. They're putting so many resources, so much time, effort, and money into developing these large-scale games. They keep having to do, like, remasters of games that released just a couple years ago. Not like Nintendo, where the Nintendo's, like, re-releasing games that released, like, 20-plus years ago. These are, like, games that released, like, 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, I feel like that's a discussion for another day as well. I'm not, like, extremely qualified to talk about it, because that's kind of, like, an issue, kind of, like, surrounding, like, Sony and things like that. Also, like, with the PS5, there are, like, barely any games on the console. Microsoft is, like, kind of, like, doing a different approach now. They're kind of moving away from like their dedicated like selling games like exclusively on their console. They're kind of like spreading out to like other consoles and things, and it's kind of interesting, like the way things are going, like in like especially like with like the working condition and layoffs and the with companies and everything. I feel like there's a possibility of something like catastrophic happening, like another video game crash. Like it's pretty unfortunate, and I feel really bad because like I feel like the video game industry as a whole, like it's just like really sad the way things are right now. Because I wish working conditions were better for people, because I feel like people definitely put a lot of effort into these games and things like outside of Nintendo. I usually just talk about Nintendo games or games on the Switch, but it's not looking good right now for like games between other companies and things. But I feel like right now Nintendo's in a unique scenario with like the Switch and their next console. If they play their cards right, they could potentially revive the gaming industry. I mean, they kind of partially are holding on to the gaming industry right now with a lot of the games that are releasing, but I really hope they actually pull through and kind of create some kind of like resurgence and things, and it kind of sets a precedent for like quality and like just output of games, like and also good working conditions as well. So I really hope that Nintendo like plays their cards right in the next couple years here, because like things in the gaming industry are just looking pretty weird right now. But yeah, so that's kind of what I wanted to discuss about the Nintendo Switch turning 7. It's just kind of interesting right now. Like, the Switch is a great console. I would say now it's my favorite Nintendo console, like just above the GameCube and Wii. There are so many great games, and the output of games has definitely been pretty good, even kind of in the later part of the Switch's lifespan. But yeah, anyways, thank you guys for watching this video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more, and make sure to check out my Discord server and Twitter if you want to. Goodbye.